First, yeah, I apologize.
No need to apologize.
No, for just most of Christianity.
Oh.
For really.
Welcome to Far Out with Faust, everybody. I am Faust Chicho, and today I'm excited and delighted to be joined again by my friend Brandon Kroll. Let me remind you about this young man and all the incredible things he's been up to. This man is a consummate researcher. He is one of the people who I always look to because he knows his stuff and he dives really deeper than most. And he just loves researching history, reading, writing, fiction, poetry, conspiracy theories. And what I love talking to Brandon about most specifically is he has some very, very deep knowledge into religions, into the history of religions, into what has happened to religions, particularly the Abrahamic religions. And I thought, with everything going on in the world today, this would be a great opportunity to talk to Brandon about some of the things we're seeing. And I know he has a lot to say about it. So thank you so much for beaming in, brother. It's great to have you back.
Thanks for having me back on. Yeah, I really appreciate it because even a lot of mainstream Christians, they don't even understand the Bible, and it's irking me because it's really reflecting poorly on how we handle a lot of societal issues in our world.
I can't imagine the frustration you must feel because I know from a point of unattached, I'm not emotionally attached to,
right.
but I see it and I'm like, oh my, it's a mess. It's a mess. But, so when Brandon and I first spoke, if you guys go back and if you're watching, you'll probably see a thumbnail pop up of that. We talked about everything from, the assassination of Lincoln to the Civil War and Rome's involvement in all that. And the Vatican, and we got into the weeds in a wonderful way. So if you haven't watched that episode, I highly recommend going back. It's an episode that continues to do well. Whenever someone clicks on it, they end up watching it. But today, we're going to talk a little bit more about some of the more modern terms that we hear in pop culture, about the Anunnaki and quote aliens, which I don't really like that word. I don't know if it fits. The fact that the Freemasons, and not the kind that most people imagine, if there ever was a benevolent Freemason, they aren't the ones that ended up infiltrating and taking over the vast majority of not only secret societies but religions. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. We're going to talk about Jesus, one of my favorite people, and some of the things that we see in today's society. Like, and you guys hear me talk about Kundalini awakening. If you're into yoga, what chakras are, and if you're Christian, you buy a Christmas tree. And Brandon has a lot of very, very awesome knowledge about where these traditions and words and things come from. And so hang tight. We're gonna get into it. But where should we start, brother? I mean, I'm sure we'll get into a debate eventually, but
for sure, yeah.
But let's start maybe with this significance of Genesis, as you mentioned, and how it debunks what's going on with my favorite subject to talk about. I'm kidding. It's like the subject I hate most, but unfortunately is on my mind because of the bloodshed going on. What's happening in Gaza?
Yeah.
I would love to hear you.
Well, for one, I would recommend chatting with a guy called Gary Wayne at some point if you ever can, because he's very big, and he's done a lot more of a deep dive with his book, The Genesis 6 Conspiracy. Him and Michael Heiser really have dug into the quote-unquote the Anunnaki from a different angle. Is it biblical? Does this have anything to do with the Book of Enoch? And it does. Applying the Book of Enoch to Genesis, suddenly we unravel everything in Exodus. The verses they're weaponizing to justify what they're doing is totally non-biblical. Because Genesis 6:4 basically states and debunks it with the sons of God came down and had affairs with the daughters of men. This would be the equivalent of the Anunnaki, the Watchers. What did this bring about? Well, if you've dug into some aspects, if some people aren't familiar, That would explain the giant races, the Nephilim. This is what Israel was really going and taking out when they went into the Promised Land. It was a conquest against the gigantic hybrids between half human, half man. So it wasn't Dust Vault, let's go conquer and slaughter. No, this was like, this is not supposed to be in this realm. God never intended for that to be in our realm.
When you
and now
say
they basically,
you mean on Earth, right?
Correct, yeah.
Yeah.
And this is why in Enoch it says when they're slain, your children, the fallen angels that committed this atrocity, aka Titans, when you hear they came down and had affairs with daughters of men, he locked them under the river Euphrates and said, when your kids are slain, they're not going to be able to come up here, and they're not coming down there for visiting hours. They're going to roam the earth for 70 generations until the time of the end. Now, what I've been digging into, I was like, okay, that's a very interesting phrasing. And I was looking into it, and I said, well, the root server for all of our computers and AI is known as demon. That's what that comes from. It means spirit being. Constantly when you do see Christ, he's always casting them out. And they're always like, you're the son of the God, creator God, not all the, Some people are getting freaked out because when you say pantheon, it's just like, it doesn't mean they're as good as God, but it's more of I have a council up here. And I think that's something a lot of Christians aren't grasping, because if they did, suddenly that makes it go, wait a minute, so there's no such thing as a special ethnicity. No.
Yeah.
And the Bible does cancel that out in Galatians 3:28 and 29. There's neither Jew nor Greek, slave or free, male or female, for you're all one in Christ Jesus. That's if you accept him. But a lot of folks, like, what's really irking me is because we've already affiliated most Muslims with Ishmael, we cast them all out, we throw the stones, and there's no good Samaritan aspect. And that's something where denominations, which I like calling demon eye nations, they're over here brainwashed, with religion, which again, reli, or means rely on, jinn, G-I-O-N, go with jinn with Middle East. Why? Because you're relying on the control of men who wear robes, men who believe in, all this fancy ceremonial stuff. It's like, no. And I think I do lean towards what you say with the Christ aspect, because Gandhi said it best, or I think it was Gandhi or some Indian philosopher. He says, I like your Christ. I don't care so much for his Christians.
Yeah. Man. You just said so much. I'm trying to, so growing up in Catholic school and getting a Catholic education is probably one of I think kids to either take to it or they don't, and when you hear something over and over, you end up tuning it out, especially when you don't understand it and your questions are not getting answered. You just kind of give up.
Right.
So I need to kind of go back and reread the Bible now with what I know about the world and religions and everything else. But, admittedly, I've always been confused as to how people tied the Bible into the Anunnaki and the, the fact that there was this interference and or intercession that went on, that is basically recorded in every religion and culture that dates back far enough. And then the question becoming, well, okay, so let's fight about what we're going to call them and possibly whose side they were on and what their motivations were, what the hell they were doing here,
Right.
And that's where people get into semantics and, arguments. But, and that's one of the reasons why I think many Christians, hardcore anyway, and you tell me if this is accurate or not. I know that that, but like they don't believe that aliens, extraterrestrials, could exist, that they must be fallen angels or these beings from the Bible, possibly. Is that quasi accurate, or is that just?
I'd say it's fairly accurate, but I think even the word alien technically means foreigner. So technically, this is not supposed to be a realm that they partake in, unless so sent by God. And I think that what people are missing is they can take a physical form. Yeah. And it's like, it's not something where you just make up. It's like you can find passage after passage after passage. He looked like a man that was talking to him, and then he's like, oh, it's actually an angel. Because again, if you're seeing a 30-foot individual suddenly stand in front of you, yikes. I think a lot of us just cancel it out in the back of our minds.
Right. But so you believe that and I'm not saying I don't, because I certainly believe that there have been giants on this earth, and even as as recently as the turn of the 20th century, we have a
Yes.
lot of archaeological evidence, and people want to say, oh, they're just tall people. It's like a bunch of tall people buried
Yeah.
in the same spot. That's fucking peculiar, don't you think?
Mhm.
Bunch of 7-foot people. Why did they all? I mean, like, we have an outlier these days, and we just like, oh wow, he should play basketball. But
Right.
it's weird when you get a bunch of them in a similar area. It speaks to different genetics. But so before I just want to make sure that I kind of understand this.
Right.
So the all right. So
Nephilim, whatever.
Nephilim, right? They were, and so tell me how how the Israelis are figured into this, this war,
Right.
and whose side the Nephilim were on, and are they the Anunnaki? Do they represent what most people call the Anunnaki, or is that a different side?
I think the best way to define that is basically the children of the Anunnaki. And this is what I would personally define based off of my own research, is finding that essentially what they've got planned is we want to get our kids some bodies back. Whereas Christ is saying, forget about those that might kill the body for your, why? Because and if you're reading the Epic of Gilgamesh, again, I always read it from their perspective. I'm like, I don't want to be biased here and come up to my own. No, let's try to see where they're coming from on this. So they really want bodies back. But the thing is, you either have those animatronic like things that they've been building like crazy these days that are kind of creepy, or is it possibly going to be a mark of a beast scenario? Whereas if you get this mark, it becomes like a Agent Smith parasitical grid, or for demons to run through. Why? Because it says in Revelation that you won't be able to off yourself. Why? Because they've been dying to have bodies back. And that's where, again, the AI aspect of things, I'm kind of like, so is it possible when they're let loose, this is what goes on? Because what does it say about the son of perdition in Revelation? It says he has power over them. Now, if you're reading books, I recommend getting Mithra. As you can see, I'm meticulous in my writing my notes. But that one's by D. Jason Cooper. This one you can get a PDF online. Mysteries of Mithra. And I'm going and noticing that this Mithra character is Christ's pagan doppelganger. It's got a lot of similarities with the lore of Attis, but there's some things here. The symbol of Mithra goes back to this guy called Tammuz in the Bible, which everybody just skims over. They're like, he's mentioned once. What relevance is he? A lot. So you start digging into the symbolism of Tammuz. His symbol is the cross. Christ dies upon the cross. That should mean something. Symbol is the eyes, opening the eyes. And he's also affiliated with the Caduceus staff and the, the Ouroboros?
Yeah.
Now you look at the magician on the tarot card. Well, again, just like Christ, white tunic, red sash. He's got an eye or a 1 over his head. What's the significance of that? Well, if you're digging into, again, etymology-wise, 666 is the number of the beast, 616, what does that mean? Well, 33 times 2, again, Masonic 33, you get 66. What's missing? The eye, the ascension aspect. So that'd be somebody who follows. Again, 322, when Skull and Bones were founded. What's the X equal? Times. 3 times 22? 66. What's missing? The ascension part. So again, when you study this stuff, and you're like, Mithras had a base of operations at the Euphrates River. Babel, which I just did a post on the other day, they still believe in it. Whether folks want to say yes, no, but they still believe that Babel was a thing, because they're building a lot of buildings look very similar. I think it was the EU Parliament and the Amazon facility. It spiraled. So why are they having all this focus on that? Because they want to rebuild the Tower of Babel that goes to war against heaven. That's something that's very significant. And Mithra, like I said, had a base of operations at Euphrates, and Babel means portal of the gods. So why would they want to rebuild this? Because it's probably true with the mythos. The angels get their wings clipped. They need help to get it back up there. How are they going to do that? Well, they need to make man think that they can ascend to be like the God Most High, which is, quote, Isaiah 14:14 from Lucifer saying, I will ascend to be like the God Most High. Everybody thinks they can get this God potential and become their own God, not looking to him, but within. That's how I'm kind of countering, where it's like the Bible doesn't necessarily say, just look within and you'll be fine. It's like, no, It requires sacrifice. I don't see most Christians sacrificing. It requires laboring. I don't see most Christians doing and posting what I post. It's
Right.
all cute selfies and whatnot. When it comes to real stuff, no. You're
Yeah.
supposed to be an emblem and a lighthouse of truth. Where is your light? Because I don't see it.
Most Christians, God, are hard. I don't know how many are even practicing, but
Yeah.
you know, um, and it's like the question is, can the church survive, in its present form? And it does find a way. And I mean, the Vatican and the fact that they're so established into the power
Right.
structure, they find a way to remain relevant, and they do what they have to do
Mm-hmm.
to stay, in their spot, which,
Yeah.
they have a spot among governments, and they know that, the Vatican particularly. And then you have all these offshoots, like the Mormons, and people don't realize that the fucking Catholic Church is responsible for all these,
Yes.
offshoots. At least they're the mountain of finances and equity that they sit on are.
Mm-hmm.
Like, why would they fund what would be perceived by a layperson as a competitive Mormon church?
Right.
It's just it's just the same reason why ExxonMobil is, Shell is, Royal Dutch is, they're just subsidiaries basically.
Right. The shell company.
Yeah, they're glorified shell companies. They believe different things, but in the end, when the right whistle blows, they're all fucking called to line up.
Yes.
That's the way I think about it. But so, like, I see I see a lot about what's happening, with the Zionists and this, the synagogue of Satan, and I feel, part of me feels very much sympathy for the vast majority of Jewish people who do not realize what has happened, particularly to the people who unfortunately have come into the power to kind of represent them, both as now as a nation, but even before, because we live in a society that is governed by resources and wealth and money. They have taken a front seat, and they're not steering the ship except towards another iceberg, and God, I keep hearing this expression, and the more I learn, the more I'm like, God damn, excuse my French, excuse my blaspheming. Yeah, I just think whoever said this was really onto something, as crazy as it sounds. But they said, the further down the rabbit hole I go, the less the T is visible.
Yeah.
Right? Did you ever hear that expression?
Yes, I have.
It's a doozy.
And I think that's kind of what folks aren't understanding. Hence why when I'm doing my presentation, especially with the chakra versus the cross, king of the use, I was trying to emphasize, we're not going after an ethnicity. I mean, I got a Jewish grandfather in my background. It's like, don't even come after me with this one.
Right.
But we're going after an ideology. And most Christians, I say quotation marks because a lot of them I think are kind of like, a Diet Coke Christian. There's nothing there. And they're basically thinking an ideology doesn't have anything to do with it. But both in Masonry, they're speaking of assassinating for Christ. When they're doing the blindfold, you have to be ready to make that commitment. And then you also have other aspects where, like I said, Jesus is a bastard song that I played the other day. And a lot of Christians are going, this is a thing? I'm like, what part of Talmud did you not understand?
Right.
If an ideology on a fictional character, quote unquote, for some folks, if they hate him this much, that has to give some sort of credence that there's something about this ideology from then.
Anti-Christian, anti-Christ about it, right? I mean, like, this is...
And what I'm asking people, I said, guys, in a world that is always, oh, you're anti this, you're anti that, is it not very easily to emerge as an anti-Christ-like figure? And everybody just thinks, oh, you're delusional. Oh, you're wrong about that one.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, folks.
I mean, it's fucking common sense to me. And I only, let's say, I read just enough of the Talmud, to understand why, it's a forbidden text
Yeah.
for regular lay people, Jewish people who are innocent of most of this, that they're not allowed to read. And I think there's a lot of reasons for that. And I think that, if you're listening to this and you're Jewish, you should go ahead and break with tradition and read what they don't want you to read, because you should be aware, of some of these books that have, maybe they're saying that they don't subscribe to them, but if you look at their actions, like the another one that you're not even supposed to mention is the protocols, the
Jewish elders.
Yeah, the protocol of the Zionist protocols of the Jewish elder. I forget the title, but it's another forbidden text,
Yeah.
But if you look at it and then you start to look at the Bolshevik Revolution and World War II and start to understand what the big concern about in Germany was, knowing the protocols, knowing the Talmud, things might start to make a little more sense about our history.
Right.
And that's the best I can tell you is, and encourage people who are listening who want a greater understanding of events. You have to be willing to read the text they tell you not to read.
Yep.
Can't be scared.
And that's where I that's where my stuff veers, is I'm not afraid to say, well, what do they believe? Even as a teenager, he was a Sunday school teacher was getting upset. He's like, why are you reading about the Da Vinci Code? I said, I'm just trying to understand. It doesn't mean I'm converting to whatever I read. And I think that's kind of the trope within mainstream Christianity. They have it where it's, oh, I have a rapture extraction, so I don't need to worry about anything else in the world. The rest of the world, they're all going to go to hell. I don't give a crap about them. And I think that's a very pious and narcissistic outlook when you're seeing atrocities that are occurring and you're just saying, oh, that's fine, because they're against God's chosen people. Do you hear yourself right now?
What? I mean, and I'm so sick of this argument. I'm like, wait, so who was God's favorite? Where was God's favorite place before 1948?
Right.
I don't understand. Why would God have favorites? We're all His children, right? I mean, isn't that safe to say? I mean, and the responses are just like, it's I hit the part of their brain that has been washed, and so there's no true response. There's just kind of a sadly, but that's religion for you, and that's I think that's one of the reasons why religions, they got to get their hooks in most people before the age of 7, because after 7 it gets much harder to convert. You gotta get in there at the level of faith, and suspension of critical questions, in a lot of ways, and there's an aspect to that I understand, being raised Catholic,
right.
And then there's an aspect that I understand is methodical in getting people, in line. Right. And it's just, you're such an enigma to me, because you're someone who knows the history, right? And how the Vatican took the existing traditions. I mean, I learned a lot about specifically how they did that, even though I've known that they did it for the longest time. Every time I check out your posts, and we're gonna make sure we tell everyone how to follow you before we're done with the podcast, but I learn about, oh, that's where the Christmas tree comes from, or that's where that's what centers around this holiday, and why they chose this date, and people just think that I mean the short-term memory is just they don't understand that all these things come from something, and that there was Rome, and they had a bunch of gods, and they had what they referred to as the rabble, and they were like, we got a problem here. The population is growing and growing, and everyone has a different idea of God, and how are we going to keep these people paying taxes and afraid to die? You know what I mean? Like, we got to do something. Well, they did something, all right. They
Well, that's where I'm emphasizing. I bought a $94 book, and it was one of the best purchases I ever had, because one of the exact, and I'm laughing because the guy does not come to a conclusion at the end of the book, but it says that Pontifices was the chief priest of sun priests. I'm like, did you just read what I'm reading right here?
Right.
So again, halos. It comes from Egypt. So again, I don't go into the whole, oh, you're stealing our gods. It's more of a, no, they basically merge son of God worship with sun God worship, Sol Invictus and Mithraism. So when you understand that they basically hybrided and camouflaged all paganism and then mixed this thing with the ideology of Christ, suddenly you get people going, well, this is Christ. He endorses crusades? Like, no, he doesn't. Well, you mind telling me how? Because apparently the one true church is thinking
Right.
this is the case. And it's like, that's where you had to start digging into somebody like Elagabalus, who was the guy that originally brought the Black Rock into Rome. And this is kind of the origins where a lot, even Mecca, how they had the Black Rock or the Black Saturn cube worship. This is where it started steamrolling into the Roman culture. They're like, dude, we already have a pantheon of gods. What would, stop imposing it on us? Eventually, Praetorian Guard took them out. But within 100 years, by the time we get to Constantine, they're like, well, what's wrong with it? The Legionnaires really like this Mithras guy. And similarly, they all met in caves. Why? Because the Iranians believed the dome, or they believed that the sky was made of stone, and they would chisel holes in their caves to look at particular stars. This is where the Magi came from. Yeah, and when you understand that connects to the Pharisees or Phariseeism, which is modern day Z ideologies, you start going, wait a minute. So they were already expecting a different Messiah figure based off of the star worship. Well, who was this individual? And what I've been digging into is apparently, according to lore, no proof, when Abram went to Egypt, the Pharaoh made a pass at his wife, and he kind of pretended it was his sister. And eventually the Pharaoh's like, okay, everybody's getting plagues and stuff like that. What's going on here? He's like, I'm sorry, it was actually my wife. He's like, all right, here, you know what? Get out of here. Take one of my daughters, take this princess, and get out of my realm. So he does. The name of this daughter, allegedly, was Hagar, the one that Abram made out with and came about with Ishmael. So when the Pharisees are over here saying, Christ, you're not the one we're looking for, you don't have, is like, I do have the credentials. But the difference between that one and this one is I'm the second Adam. God spoke it into existence. Again, I've done some more deep dives to kind of give that a little credence because I know it sounds kind of hokey at first. Then you look at the other side and you're like, they want bloodlines. They want bloodlines to trace all the way back that they can basically say, we don't need you, God. That's what the star Remphan or star David means. All the elements coming together, which is what the 4 horses on the black cube, when they would pull it, that represents the 4 elements: fire, water, air, earth. And the black cube is basically the representation of all this put together. Hence, Alagabal connects to Baal. When you understand that, and you're like, well, Helios drives a chariot. Yeah. This eventually traces all the way back to Tammuz, doppelganger. And this is what the Catholic Church worships. It's like, well, no, it doesn't. Etymology of cathode, cathedral, moon worship, universal. Look up Sigil of Astaroth. You're going to find the pentagram, which goes back to a witch in the Bible, aka Nimrod's wife mother. So when you start digging into that, you start going, wait a minute, and Virgin Mary is known as the Queen of the Heavens? Yes. So again, this is where I ask them, if you're defending your denominational adjectives or your practices, traditions of men, more than advocating for Christ, then you're a religious person. I have to question if you're really a Christian, because your focus and priority is in the wrong place. Sorry, that was a bit of a rabbit trail, but
no, it was great though. It's true, but people don't realize, people don't understand the history, and then it's very hard to believe.
Yes,
because it's part of their identity then,
right?
And that's why so many people, both Christians here in America, can't believe what they're hearing about Israel.
Right.
But they don't understand, first of all, that even people in Israel can't believe what they're hearing about Israel. First of all, second of all, those people, the people like Bibi, who are in charge. This man does not have a conscience. You know what I mean? Like this man is a killer. I mean, people want to talk about Putin and George Herbert Walker Bush. And those men were killers. Especially, Putin probably did it with his bare hands on more than one occasion, whereas Herbert, schemed and planned to do it.
Right.
But Bibi, I think he's got experience in just about every way you could kill someone, and that's the reason why he's in charge over there. He's ruthless, and he's always been ruthless, and he has no conscience. He doesn't give a shit about. I don't even know how many Jews he actually cares about. I mean,
not much.
it doesn't seem like, I mean, his attempt at rescuing the hostages has been incredible, don't you think? I mean, how many
They've had
has he
11
saved?
offers for a ceasefire or exchange of hostages. Again, when I'm showing this to my buddy, he's like, I didn't hear anything about it. I'm like, because you're
Of course not.
brainwashed with Daily Wire and PragerU. Duh.
Keep listening to Ben Shapiro, Sherlock.
Dude, I literally told him when this all started, trust me, take 3 months break from subscribing to this, try to subscribe to some other apps, then come back and you start to see if you see the difference. Nope. Nope, can't do it. He likes being lied to.
Yeah. I mean, it's easier than trying to swallow the truth. But yeah, I mean, it should be obvious. And I've gone over that whole subject at length and had many very informative podcasts about, and put it out there. And people are interested and people are learning the truth, and people are coming around and I have these very quiet conversations on my Instagram with people who are Jewish, and who have had the courage to speak out about what's going on, and even if it means being ostracized by their family, but they see what's happening. Some of them are closer than others, literally, to that whole conflict right now. And what's crazy is it's like the whole country is so small, yet even with the amount of bombs that they've dropped, and even with this being, completely an international, ongoing, soap opera and tragedy, the majority of Israelis are not affected. I mean, the vast majority, I should say probably, 90, 95%, just get up every day, go to work, read the paper about how great the war is going and how many hostages are still being held. They read articles about how, well, now we got to go into Rafah. We got to make sure we root out Rafah. Meanwhile, the land that they've destroyed is already being put on the market. They have no right to that land. The settlements that they had were illegal, have been illegal. I mean, but Bibi's not worried at all, because who's going to fuck with him?
Right.
Who's going to fuck with him? Anybody who fucks with him fucks with us, and no one wants to fuck with us.
Because that's what I told somebody. I said, basically what they're doing is they're bullying on this kid that's in the playground. They take off their glasses and they start wailing at him, stuff like that. The minute somebody comes up and says, hey, what are you doing? They put the glasses back on. They're like, don't hurt me. With the and it's just like, no, I saw you kicking this person. Don't give me the excuse that you're weak no. And why do they do that? Because they know their big brother is going to come over and back them up if anything hits the fan.
It's so cowardly. It's so infuriating. I can't even imagine. And then they wonder why the general sentiment coming out of, Iran and I mean, obviously Hamas was formed in part and parcel as a reaction to the Israeli terrorism and occupation, but they're like, destroy Israel. Oh, how could they possibly think such a bastardly thing? Those evil people. They want to destroy Israel. Really?
Right.
I can't imagine why.
Right.
It's just, you're right. They're bad. Meanwhile, all of Gaza, or what's left of it, is being obliterated. Millions of people starving. Fucking 15,000 children are dead.
Yeah.
15,000 children. They are the most innocent among us.
Yeah.
If any other country did this, any other country in the world did this, there would be fucking repercussions, and steep ones at that. But because it's Israel, and because the United States is standing over its shoulder like the fucking bullies that we are, no one can do anything.
Right.
It's just, it's such a crime. It's terrible.
And it's sickening because even with the protests, it's like, guys, do you see the map of everybody that recognized Palestine as a country? It says the only ones that aren't, Europe and America. That should tell you, I think Australia too, but it's like, that should give you a little bit of an inkling. The places that have been exploited into oblivion are the ones that are saying, no, we recognize this. Why? Because they're done. They're done with being occupied. They're done with having this tyrannical regime dictate and control and manipulate their lives. And I think, as I told somebody, I said, basically Zionism is Stockholm Syndrome for Christians, for evangelical Christians. Because if they understood that most people in charge of the jib-jab held dual citizenship, with
Oh
Israel.
yeah.
It was in charge of the production. Again,
And Israel
Goyim.
was one of the most jabbed places on the planet. I mean, talk about hook, line, and sinker. Their people, they had to get, I mean, they had to get 5.
Yeah.
You know, like there was, last I heard, it was 5 and running.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there was no let off on that. And of course, it's a militant kind of, the orientation of the society is very militaristic anyway. So
Yeah.
they say go, and people just, you know, they line up. Fucking crazy, man. I mean,
it is crazy. And it's like, guys, if they call us Goyim, which means cow,
yeah,
vaccine means of or from a cow, and they're now injecting this in a majority predominant white population, you kind of have to start scratching your head. Well, no, you're wrong. All right, let's look at their Kabbalah tree, right? Okay, means at the top it's Kether, translated into Masonic Latin, corona, a spiked crown. Just like the spiked crown of Attis, Statue of Liberty. And you're wondering why we're bankrolling them so much? Because it's the same Messiah figure that they're looking for, the Melkut, the Leviathan, the son of perdition that comes up from the abyss. It's interesting because that's also nicknamed the second Cyrus, according to their text, and he wipes out all the ones that are causing, oh, you're anti. He wipes them out. And who is the champion of Noahide laws that happens to have a variation of Tammuz's name? Trump. And like he said this at a rally. So it's time to implement the death penalty for anti-Semitic. And I'm like, wait a minute. Do you hear the crowd cheering? On top of that, MAGA means magician. It's the highest priest position on Church of Satan website.
Yeah.
And it's also the highest priest of the sun. When did we start dropping bombs over there?
So much.
On the solar eclipse? Iranian sun god. That connects with Mithraism. And what did his followers wear? Red caps. I'm like, guys, I don't know.
You're wasting your breath on them. Yeah. Make America. I'm like, you know, I mean, I try not to tell anyone who to vote for, but I do say, hey, if you're gonna vote, you know, maybe vote for someone who is willing to change at least the 3-letter agencies and the state of health in this country. Not that it's going to change, but people are like, no, you know, I'm voting for Trump. I'm like, I thought you said you were pro-life,
right?
and then it's just like I never hear from that person again.
Yeah.
You know, they're like, oh, I can't vote for Bobby because he's not pro-life, and I'm like, Trump's not pro-life. What are you talking about? And then they're like, but they just I don't know, man. It's crazy.
It's self-justifying it to themselves. Yeah. They want to give the narrative that they want to hear, something that makes them feel good. This is where I honestly sometimes I look at politics and I'm like, you literally have funneled it down.
Yeah.
That it has to be left or right. And again, I think like Carlin, I'm like, they all's messed up. You guys just stop playing their game, because even if you like, if I go after Biden, they automatically think I voted for Trump. And if you go after Trump, they automatically think it's like there's third parties, there's Green Party, and they can't, for thinking like that is such an anomaly. And they when you do say I'm voting for a third ticket, they go, oh, that's throwing away your vote. Why would
you throw your vote away? Yeah, they're conditioned. They don't even realize they're programmed to say that, you know.
I'm like, do you realize that's Stockholm syndrome? You're basically saying, no, they're not that bad. It's like, no, they're the ones that are implementing all the problems in this world and society. Well, don't worry, if you vote for him, the gas prices will go back down. I don't know. Let's say World War III kicks in. Are you going to justify it for him then?
Look, I just don't. It's not that I mind Trump. I mean, and I feel bad for him in a lot of ways, because he's been the target of a lot of the, you know, globalist forces, because they're not about nationalism. Obviously, you know, they're about ridding the nationalism of the planet and getting rid of borders, and you know, they don't want there to be any more rah we America, you know, or any country. And so he's an enemy in that regard, but I don't trust him as far as I could throw him, because his ego is so big. He's simply manipulated. He's easily turned around. You could tie his fucking shoes together, knit his pants together, you know, put a blindfold on him, and he wouldn't even figure out that it was going on in time to make his way out of the fucking room. You know, and I don't want someone like that who's proven to be completely incompetent, particularly when there are global, you know, nefarious powers very busy, planning the next shit show for us.
Yeah.
I don't want someone like him in charge who's not going to be able to get us out of it.
Right.
You know, like if there is a position on the planet that is supposed to be anyway of such power that it could technically steer a country away from these kind of, you know, the mandates which we saw, which of course were all an illusion. There was never true law backing them. But if you had a president with a spine and some knowledge, he would have said, "Wait a minute, it's absolutely unconstitutional to try to lock the country down." I'm just going to say, listen, if you're feeling good, go to work. If not, stay home, play it safe. Okay, thank you.
Right,
that's my speech for today. And people will say, "Oh, but it's his fault." No, he told everyone if they felt okay to go ahead, and that's why they had to say, "If you don't have symptoms, this doesn't mean you're not sick." Oh, no, really? Oh my God! But listen, I want to know, how does the Christmas tree, the Kabbalah, the chakra, and Kundalini, which I'm a big fan of, just so you know, how does their connections to the Caduceus staff, and we've already mentioned a little bit about the Corona pandemic, right? How do these random things prove Christ exists?
Because it basically proves his doppelganger's existence. Something I was reading in a book, because again, I can have a hunch, but I don't have any proof. Then you read a book and you're like, well, you just knocked it out of the ballpark for me. With proving basically the chakra aspect, you have to understand there's the two serpents intertwined, and you have one of them being the father, and you have the other one being the mother. What is that? The sun and the moon. You're going off of the Tri-Hermes with the text, and he's known for being one of the ones who carries or bears this symbol. He says the sun is father, the moon is mother. Well, that's very interesting because Nimrod was technically the first sun god, as he saw himself. This is what a lot of emperors saw themselves as. And the moon is mother. If you ever seen that classic photo, the Masonic one, where it has the individual in the middle pointing upward like this. He has an anchor in one hand and a key, and they're all sitting on a ladder. They're sitting between two pillars, and there's a third pillar.
Yeah.
So if you're familiar with that, that's the unholy trinity of Babel. Well, how do I know that? Well, Semiramis is sitting underneath the sun, so that represents going back to the father. Down below at the very bottom, you have a man pointing upward towards the Queen of the Heavens symbols, which is the stars and the crescent moon. On top of every Islamic mosque, what do you see?
Crescent moon.
You have a crescent moon. So when the sun comes over into the middle of it, that's the conjoining of their union. That's also the Eucharist. Now, fun fact, it was the Catholic Church that founded Islam. A lot of people are going to give me some kickback, but watch the Walter
I didn't realize that. I should have known that. But
moon worship again? I don't buy that. Wow. Well, I have more stuff. I'm trying to be very delicate because I'm getting a lot of Palestinian followers.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to be very delicate with how I explain this. But a gentleman in the 1920s was breaking down how original root word for their moon god was sin. Ironically enough, what is a sin? Sin means to miss the mark. Start scratching your head. So going back, who's in the very middle of that picture? We have this individual, like I said, he's holding an anchor, which means hope in Freemasonry, and he holds a key, unlocking something. What's over his head? The all-seeing eye with the sun logo. Oh, that's very interesting. So what does this have to do with anything? 9/11. What? Two pillars. Represents the two emerald tablet pillars. What fell? 9/11. It was the two twin towers, the trade centers, which connects to Hermes. Hermes was affiliated with trade. The third building, what fell? 47 floors of the seventh building. Again, Freemasonry. What does that represent? Wisdom, ascending. 9/11 was coronation day for kings in ancient Israel. That's very interesting.
Wow.
It's likely that's actually when Christ's birthday was, during the Feast of Trumpets, which correlates with what we get in Revelation.
Wow. I didn't know that. That would be fucking the ultimate irony, and considering Israel's involvement.
Right.
Wow.
And certain individual that I mentioned before was conceived roughly around that time and came out in June 14th, 1948. Okay, big deal. A lot of people are born. Okay, so, 46. So you got 1 plus 9. That equals X, 10. 4 plus 6 equals 10, X. All right, big whoop. He was 55 when the towers went down. 5 plus 5, X. Corona happened exactly 19 years later. 1 plus 9, X.
Mm.
He was president 45. 4 plus 5, 9. Then you get 47, 9, 11. Oh, come on. You're just playing number games, all right? 365 days out of the year, which is important in Mithraism. You can buy the books I just recommended. Okay, big whoop. What is that? 3 plus 6, 9. 6 plus 5, 11. 9, 11. 3 equals the triangle, or the trihermes. 6 equals the star Remphan, which is Nimrod's sigil. 5 would equal the pentagram. So again, how does this connect back to the Christmas tree? All right, let's go back all the way back to the beginning. It says when Nimrod was slain, his blood fell upon a conifer tree. Conifer means pine cone. So, all right, what does that have to do? Pine cones used to be given out up to like the 1400s as a symbol of hearts. Pineal gland, pineal gland. That's what that comes down. Right. Why? Because it says my heart and mind is yours. I'm thinking about you. That's where Valentine's comes from.
Nice. Okay.
It was a symbol of purification. I think it was Descartes that was breaking that down etymology-wise. Again, pine sol. It was like pine cone, sol invictus, where we get the word soldier from. S-O-L, sol. D-I-E-R means destined to die. So I'm destined to die for a sun god.
Oh,
Dios vol.
Wow, yeah.
Suddenly you go, wait, it's a sun god cult. Yeah. So basically, if you're starting to see how they're justifying one side, you start going, well, wait a minute. When we get back now to Corona and this chakra aspect, the spiked crown, what do we have on Baphomet's arms? Solve, coagula. Solve, to bring something from a heavenly realm into the earthly realm. And this is also tattoos you'll find on J.K. Rowling's wrist. Coagula, blood clot. Did you know in the Mithra, I have the exact quote here because I don't want people to... So it says, these symbols are the two great representative in the alchemetical and Rosicrucian tradition.
Yeah.
By the right hand raised with the finger pointing upwards and the left hand pointing downwards, as above, so below, accompanied by the mystic utterances coagula and solve, collect and disperse, fix and vitalize. That is with Mithra. So wait a minute. You're telling me blood clot has a connection to do with Baphomet, right? Because Solve, what was Twin Towers? That's bringing their Antichrist figure into existence. Coagula, blood clot. So what would the pineal gland on Baphomet's forehead represent? 5G, pentagram. Putting an illusion over the hearts and minds of men, that I can ascend to be like a god most high. Because a lot of people are getting the misnomer, Baphomet's Satan, and he's not.
Right.
Because just like God needed an earthly representative, you have to understand in the occult, they believe in regeneration, reincarnation. That this is Nimrod, that he keeps coming back. But this is going to be our champion this time. He's going to wipe out the enemies of the Yus. This is what they're thinking. This is the second Cyrus. Don't believe me? Okay, Balfour decorations was on a temple coin. And within 100 years of that, you have the Abrahamic Accords. And they have Trump's name on there with Cyrus's name. And it's like, guys, I want to be wrong, but even that's the fact in history that they don't always talk about that, yet it's still there. So now with 9/11, with Corona, how does that connect with the Christmas tree? Because Christmas trees represents the spiked crown head god Attis. When was the Christmas trees taken down? January 6th, 12 days after the original day of Christmas. January 6th, how interesting. The Epiphany of John the Baptist, where Christ was baptized by John. Secondly, as an adolescent, he was visited by the Magi. Root word for Magi? Maga.
Damn. I mean, it's people want to write these things off as coincidence, but when you start to add up, the odds of it being coincidental that these things fall the way they fall, you understand that it becomes virtually impossible, that there is something there. There is absolutely something to the symbology, and they're well aware of it, even if you're not. Now I don't know how those things prove Christ existed. They certainly prove that there's a bunch of people, who absolutely believe in this and are working diligently to make sure that these prophecies are being fulfilled, at least on their end.
Right.
But go ahead. You were going to say something.
No, I can explain a little bit more because again, I just need clarity, and because I'm like a rabbit trail when I go ping, ping, ping.
Yeah.
it's pinball up here. So basically, if they have this individual that believes in everlasting life, immortality, that's what the Christmas tree ultimately would represent. And most Christians are going, well, I don't do it for those reasons. It's like, it's still condemned in the Bible. So why would you be bringing that into your home?
Yeah.
Abstain from all appearances of evil. So if you're supposed to abstain from something and you got other people that are saying, well, the Bible, what do you mean? It dictates my life. Because why? It means I have to sacrifice something and I have to pick up my cross. Cross is a symbol of Tammuz. You're dying upon a cross. Your doppelganger's cross. Why? Because by coming back to life, you prove them all frauds. Regeneration, reincarnation. No, you saw me like this, hence the scars. That's significant. Well, how do you know he existed? Because somebody really hates him that much, and yet there happens to be a parallel that they're putting all their chips on to deceive the world. What does this mean? This goes back into Project Bluebeam. What? Catholic Church. They just said that they're planning for when there's the invasion, or
Long
we can,
time coming.
maybe they'll be baptizing us and ascending. Why? Because, well, if I may, I'd like to pitch the idea is that, oh, you guys, we've been having it wrong. We've been having these individuals coming down throughout the centuries via Muhammad and Jesus and Buddha, and you guys just weren't getting it. You created all these religions, but don't worry, we're now here to help fix it for all mankind.
We got it all along. We just didn't want to tell you.
Right. And I think that's honestly what they're going to do, and they're going to do that via the means of the Catholic Church. Why? Because they're already prepping an instruction manual via the Vatican College that basically I have other sheep that you do not know of.
Yeah.
And they're trying to... Sorry.
No, go ahead. They're trying to what?
So they're trying to weaponize this concept of, so we've also been getting it wrong as the Catholic Church, and there's basically a whole bunch of these deities that we just have been mislabeling, and the Jesus guy isn't really real. And again, most New Agers and controlled opposition, what do you see? Candace Owens, flirting with Catholicism. Jordan Peterson, flirting with Catholicism. Marmari, flirting with Kakar.
So why would they try to disown Jesus? They're never going to do that.
No, not disown, but basically say, oh, we had it wrong. There's several.
They do that, they'll schism the church in two. They'll never.
I don't know, because basically
they're going to probably come out and I think that they'll be wiser to play the extraterrestrial angle, say that they've been, that they have had this knowledge, and that many of depending on the chosen narrative they agree on, they may say that many of these beings are, in Christ, with Christ, and so don't be alarmed unless we tell you to be, unless you see a red one, and then be alarmed.
Might have a problem.
But here's the thing. So I understand a lot of what you're saying, and I understand. But let me just say that. So from where I'm sitting, and I say this with all due respect, there is a certain amount of, and I'm not saying it's not warranted, because I know damn well it is, but a lot of the things that you talk about, like for example, I've had an experience with Kundalini energy, or whatever you want to call it. Spirit is energy, I think, in a lot of ways, but the way people experience Kundalini is different. But for a lot of people, it comes in kind of, this incredible sensory experience that is almost, I think, safe to say, like almost psychedelic in nature. It can be very, very intense and wonderful. And then it can also be very difficult for people, and a lot of times people who have had this experience, then they tend to, and this is from what I've learned from speaking to people. I'm just going off what I've accumulated in understanding. They also believe that they are, more clairvoyant than they were, that they have a greater ability for precognition, and many of them are inspired to use those talents, through art or through therapy, and trying to help people heal. And so when I look at Kundalini, and then I think about the way that it's there's Kundalini yoga, and then the word
variations,
thrown around, but I see nothing in it that I could call scary or evil or even even concerning.
Mm-hmm.
And that's my experience with it. Christmas trees, same thing. I love learning the history about it, and I love what you taught me about the pine cone just now, because
Right.
I've always liked pine cones, but I didn't realize that they were kind of like the first Valentine, you know, almost.
Yeah.
That's very cool. But like, so intention also affects experience, right? And if you're, you know, John Smith and family from, you know, bumfuck Oklahoma, and in the spirit of Christmas and giving and celebration with your family,
Mm-hmm.
you kind of benignly buy a Christmas tree to put your gifts that you worked hard all year to buy your kids under it. You're not. I don't think that the energy is there for these people to be invoking, you know, what you're talking about. I think it's pretty innocuous. You know, it's harmless. Now, I don't know that. I can't know that. But that's kind of like what I would say. So, but I'm not saying that ignorance is always bliss, but a lot of these things are taken kind of for how they're presented, and because people don't realize the history in them. So, like, I don't know. How do you reconcile that with what you understand about it?
No, that very good question. I love the way you phrase that as well. Basically, this comes into a little bit with the slide that kind of prompted this whole chat. Is that as a Christian, a real Christian, you're supposed to abstain from all appearances of evil. Why? So it makes the culture go, why are you doing that? Why aren't you doing or supporting your government? Why aren't you? Why? Because it starts becoming religion and tradition of men. That's what tradition translates in the Bible as Kabbalah, which is what Christ was constantly condemning Pharisees of, because you do things and you know not why you do them. So if you get into that mindset, why? Because you're starting to love things of this world rather than focusing on God. Why? Because God's calling you constantly to look towards his son and emulate that. Hence, Christian, anointed one, you're supposed to emulate that. Do you ever see the movie The Mummy with Brendan Fraser?
Yeah, a long time ago. Yeah.
But there's that scene, they go down into the cavern, they can't see a thing unless they start walking with the torch. So what does one of them do? You're going to tilt this mirror upward, it's going to reflect the sun, and it's going to bounce off all the other mirrors that are down in this cavern. That's what it should be as a Christian. That your faith or your standards are having an impact on making everybody go, that's counterculture. That's counter what we do and believe. Why do you do that? Because why? Because this then forces the Christian to get to the point of, I can answer that for you. Not just, I condemn it, it's pagan, that's pagan.
Right.
It's just like, no, because then you start becoming a butthole.
Right.
It's like, no, you have to start giving an explanation to me, because if you just constantly are judging without context, then that's not righteous judgment. Because that's a lot of people say, oh, you shouldn't be judging. It's like, no, not for you. Like, if you want to be LGBTQ, go for it.
Right.
That's on you. For a Christian, it's kind of like, okay, I can't touch pork as a Muslim. And why? Because this is what the Quran teaches me. I'm not supposed to. So as a Christian, I'm supposed to abstain from certain acts and practices. Why? Because the Bible condemns it, that it's going to open up yourself to possibly demonic possession.
Right.
Now, again, don't take my word for it. I pinned a comment of somebody else who went through a testimony, and she went through a whole cleansing thing after having one of those moments. Does it happen to every individual? No, right. But she again, I'm going off of somebody else's testimony because I don't bother to tap into that stuff. Yeah. But I have encountered individuals that have dabbled in Ouija boards, and when I was in the room, they started going all liberal. I literally thought it was a liberal breakdown.
That's hilarious.
Not realizing, I said, I wonder if it has anything to do with my presence. Because there were two believers in the same room, and I think that kind of which was triggering a little bit of a
yeah.
Why? Because then it's having a combat of energies and spirit. Because one is saying I can attain this or I can find this on my own. Again, there's the I when you're doing the little Ouija board, and the other one is saying I'm submitting to something far greater that barely I understand, but I understand the gift of it. Because like you had the Kundalini experience, me when I accepted Christ, I can't describe it any other way. But I literally felt, I was like, okay, that was creepy. Is that normal? I'm looking at my dad. I'm like, is that, he didn't even see it. But for me, that gave me a confirmation that this belief, a lot of people don't have a hard time understanding. It's basically a faith of riddles. But how do you understand it? It's the gift of the Holy Spirit. It's like, well, the Bible's written by man, but it was inspired by holy men of God, as it says in Peter. So a lot of people don't understand. And again, I'd vary that if they're Christian, if they don't understand this, because they say Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. It's the Father, it's the Son. What was the gift of the Holy Ghost? That is a gift. It constantly says gift when you look it up in the Bible. Most Christians don't understand this, because when that temple veil was ripped in two and Christ drew his last breath, the Holy of Holies was only a place where the high priest could go. And he had to wear all white. It's like a bride.
Yeah.
He calls the bride of Christ ecclesia. When that was ripped in two, what happens? The Holy Spirit that was kept in the Ark of the Covenant, suddenly that now can, if you seek it, can be found within a Christian's life. And that's Holy Spirit discernment. A lot of Christians don't understand this. Why? Because they're going into traditions. Well, what's wrong with it? I just do it because my family's always done this. Yes. But the thing is, like myself, I barely have family, barely have peers my own age. All I got is my freaking research and podcasts.
Because you're an old soul.
And because I'm making those sacrifices, it pisses everybody off, which is making me go, it's true. They hated me before they hated you, because I'm trying, even before being 30 years old, to have standards in my freaking life. You know, and it's like, yeah, right. It's like, why in any way, shape, or form or means would I choose this?
Not a good time to have those. I'm just kidding. No, I hear you, dude. I hear you. Listen, I think it's noble to sacrifice.
Yes.
But you know, the bigger thing that you and I disagree on is, you know, the reason. And most people who are, I'm not including you in this because you obviously are doing it for a different volition, you know. But I think a lot of people who are indoctrinated into religions follow out of fear, you know, particularly, I mean, Catholicism, and even there's a lot of guilt in Jewish culture. That's one thing Jews and Catholics have in common, you know, guilty conscience. And, you know, I used to go to confession,
right,
and I never understood for the life of me how saying 10 Hail Marys was going to put me back in good standing with the Lord. You know, I was like, I just spent like 15 minutes telling you some shit I did that, you know, I know I'm supposed to feel bad about and was, quote, wrong.
Right.
Even though it didn't really hurt anyone, and, you know, but whatever. And say 10 Hail Marys and cool, I'll say 10 and I'll be back in a week because I'm probably doing the same fucking thing. You know, it always, I didn't really get it, you know, and I still don't get it, but it is what it is.
Right.
I'll tell you what my aha moment, okay, what slapped me in the face was when I had children. And looking at them, my first one was enough, you know, looking at him and knowing that he came from me. He's you know, my creation in a lot of ways.
Yes.
And knowing in my heart that there's nothing that this kid could ever do. Not now, not in his life. Even if he, you know, was to, even if it was to forfeit my own, that would make me say, I'm sorry, but I have to banish you and you have to be punished. I could never do that to him. He will always achieve you know, the circumstances of the choices he makes. That is going to be part of his life, you know. But I've never, you know, and I was punished growing up, you know, in a Catholic Italian American family.
Right.
In more ways than one, you know. I don't just mean like, you know, I mean like literally punishment was part of the discipline system among other things in my house. But I could never imagine doing that to my son, you know, and I'm like, that's me, you know. Imagine God, you know, looking out at his creations that he has gifted with the sentience that he enjoys, and said, do what you will, you know, I'm here. And to then turn around, see this is where I really struggle to understand how I used to believe this and how people still believe this, you know. How could he then turn and say, oh, I forgot to mention that is going to cost you a life, an eternity in suffering, you know, like, there's no getting out of what you've done here. Sorry. I do still love you unconditionally, of course.
Right.
But suffer in the flames of eternal damnation, you little, you know, cretin.
Miscreants.
You troublemaker little,
Yes.
like
Yes.
I cannot reconcile that because I can't fathom doing it to these beings that I love unconditionally.
Right.
So while I understand the struggle and I understand the discipline that you use in your life and the standards you
Right.
hold yourself to, it is noble. But I don't think that it's necessarily any more pleasing to God than if you went about and did things, and honored him in your own way,
Right.
because you're his, and
Right.
he's looking down on you with love the same way I look down on my kids with love.
Mm. Well, if I could,
Please.
because I think that is a beautiful metaphor that you brought up, making it personal and aligning that with your son. And I think a lot of people don't seem to understand. It's like, why would a loving God do all this? Well, it's like, well, it was either going to be this one, you're going to be tortured and maimed and all kinds of cannibalistic acts with the Nephilim, descendants of these fallen angels, or I can wipe them all out. We can try to go back to the drawing board while other people are going to try to tap into those spirits that they have, the spirit beings when Nephilim is slain. Again, that goes to the Greek, daemon, Daemon. So they're kind of going, oh, I want to be a symbiotic relationship with them. Hence, you see all the stuff in Hollywood doing this and all that. That's
Yeah.
what that represents, is I want to be possessed. And again, why are they upset with the whole thing with Gaza? Why are you blocking celebrities, stars of Hollywood? Hollywood connects to druids. What do they think? They think that they're symbiotically related to these things. You block out the influencer, it's going to be a problem for them. So this is where it comes down to is, again, back to Genesis 6:4. God's all-knowing, right? Okay, try to explain this to me. Why would he just, because I don't want robots to love me back. I want people to choose to love me back. I already know that my heavenly council is going to betray me by doing this act. I know that they're going to corrupt my beautiful idea that I have for mankind. Here's the thing. They want to go down there, that's fine. You want to make that choice, you want to have an earthly pleasurable existence, fine. They'll have punishments as well, and your kids will be punished for this. Here's the thing, though. We get in New Testament, behold what manner the love of the Father, that we, Christians, should be called the sons of God. We had Genesis 6:4, the sons of God came down and had a... So are we replacing them? Yes. And your acts, your laboring, your sacrifices, what is that emulating? I am choosing the Father, Son. That's what communion actually means. Is I'm accepting this marriage covenant to actually say I'm willing to sacrifice and be inducted as the bride of Christ into this relationship. Not that I like it at first, because independence, that's sovereignty, that doesn't make any sense. But if I'm understanding eternity wise, like you said, everybody's kind of tense right now because they're not sure what comes after this.
Yeah.
For a Christian, there's a little bit of this. I have comfort. I have an inner peace that, again, whether I'm wrong or right, but the thing is, does it actually make me feel better that I'm doing this? In most ways, yes, spiritually speaking, because I'm not hanging out with people that are wasting my time.
Right.
On the personal sense, it does hurt. It does hurt that you're having to make sacrifices, but you understand. This is why Christ had to speak constantly in parables, because most people don't want to resonate. They just want to be an NPC with the goldfish gaping mouth of, oh, oh.
Yeah.
Why? Because it was going to require work and effort in order to get it. This is why the parable of the servants with the talents. Everybody's always saying, oh, he's just going to be against atheists and this person and that person. He's just like, no, he's talking about Christians. He's got the 10, three servants. He's like, I gave you 10, I gave you 5, I gave you 1. Guy who had 10 made 20. Guy who had 5 had made 10. Goes the other one. He's like, I hit it. What? I hit it. I was afraid you'd get mad at me. He's like, no, I want you to at least try to do something with what you got. Even if you're a paraplegic and you're forced in a wheelchair, did you try, doesn't mean you have to be like the best, but it just means, did you try to invest in what you believed in? And I think a lot of people, they don't understand that because, well, I went to church. That's checkbox Christian. That's cubicle Christianity. You were doing a tradition of men, but when you were living it, did you actually emulate me? And I think it's best summed up with the evangelist quote. He says there's 5 gospels: Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, and the Christian. But most folks never read the first 4.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing, you learn about the history and the specific procurement of the Bible and the translation of a translation of a translation of a translation. And I put no faith in what's left. I mean, I know some of it is very well written, and there's much to be learned from it. But I don't trust even what has been chosen, what has been decided to be put forth as a representation because I don't trust the men who ended up in charge of it. I don't trust that they had any good intention for the rest of humanity at
Right.
any point other than fear and control. And so, while I think it's wise to read all the Bibles, all the ones that were, quote, considered, and see what they've rejected. I think there's wisdom in a lot of ancient texts. And I just don't like, I will never be able to trust anything that has Vatican approval, and the Bible certainly does. And that's just, I feel like that is a very, very safe, that's a principle for me to have, that I feel is safe.
That's healthy. Yep.
Which is crazy because I was raised Catholic and I received all the sacraments and all this jazz, I was an altar boy for 8 years. I got it. But it's, and I believe Jesus walked the earth, and I believe in Jesus. I believe he came here to teach us a lot. And I think that, unfortunately, as I'm sure you agree in your own way, his teachings have been hijacked, for the most part. And whereas humanity could have really been changed by him, we're now in a place that is, I don't know if it's better or worse, but I do know that religion tends to be the great divider, and the specific kind of Christianity that you have is far more in its own way spiritual, and I think like it doesn't seem to me like you're condemning the Islamic people to be heathens and barbarians.
No.
I mean, even as we speak out about what the Israeli government's doing, we're not necessarily speaking out against Jewish people.
Right.
We're speaking out against people who we know have evil intentions because of their actions.
Right.
And you're just you're an enigma to me because you have all this knowledge, but the things that you believe and subscribe into me, I'm just like, but, and then for you to stop there, I marvel at you're a very unique man. So
appreciate that.
and I always learn a lot every time I talk to you, every time I read your posts. I've read books that you've recommended, and I've learned a lot from them. So I was excited to bring you back and talk more about some of the rich history behind a lot of things that people have in their lives, understand, and don't really know what's behind it. And I think it's important that we learn our history. You know that about me anyway, and you share that opinion as well.
Yes.
Absolutely. So what else are you working on, brother? How's the I know the last we spoke you were like trying to really launch your own podcast.
Yeah.
And I've been super busy, and if you did that and I didn't realize it and I haven't mentioned it yet, then forgive me.
It's all good.
But tell everyone where to find you if you have an ongoing podcast.
Yep.
And so that they know how to keep up.
Perfect. Yeah, I've done a couple of spots on other people's platforms, and usually they're very well liked because, again, I don't just go from the cynical perspective of, okay, just Bible. I'm like, no, 90% of the time I'll show you their texts, and then we'll try to see, is there any correlation here with the biblical text? So I've started my own called Manna Daily podcast. And again, it's not always a lot posted at this time. I'm still getting some of the technical issues down because that's not my strong suit. But my presentations are very thorough. I'll take screenshots. I'll show you visuals. You can find it on both Rumble and YouTube. And then with my Instagram, you can find Krollology, like my last name, ology, _101. You'll find some of the posts that he's been referring to. But it's really hard to condense big stuff into 10 slides and then try to explain it to folks, So I do recommend the shows.
Yeah. And you could check out our first podcast as well. And definitely subscribe to his IG because you'll continuously be informed and enlightened about things that you thought you knew about. And there's usually more to it. I also love the way that Brandon brings in, celebrities and modern day things that we see,
No.
you know, and sees the symbology and the occultism that is inherent in them. And there is a lot of that going around, certainly, and not the kind that I would say is peachy, you know, that not the benevolent kind, but the malicious kind, sadly. And yeah, and if you're just listening to this podcast and you have not taken the time to give us Far Out with Faust a 5-star review, you should absolutely do that because we need them. And you know, if you're not subscribed or following, please do that as well because we thrive and we live on those. So Brandon, it's been a pleasure, brother. Listen, we got to figure out what we want to talk about next time, and then we'll dive deep into that. But it was great to have you back, and I'm glad I did. You know, do you want to say anything in closing?
First, yeah, I apologize.
No need to apologize.
No, for just most of Christianity, for really. Again, I don't take Catholic as again. I'm probably going to get some hate for that, but I don't take it the counterfeit's word for it. I do apologize that most of them don't get it. I apologize that they've really skewed up their testimony for reaching folks. And basically, yeah.
It's not their fault.
No, it's not their fault. But at the same time, sometimes you're willfully choosing it. As it says in Hosea 4:6, my people are destroyed for a lack of knowledge. Because you rejected knowledge, I will also reject you from being my high priest. So that's kind of going to be coming back on them because there is some standards and expectations when you're serving. So, yeah, that's pretty much what all I got to say. I know it sounds kind of weird as an ending. No, but
no need to. I mean, I understand why you apologize, but
yeah,
you'll find a lot of you know, easy listeners in my audience and people who are, you know, very open to varying opinions and don't feel the need to attack or, you know, you'll get that from the religious part of
every
the
time.
listeners who will probably come from your side of the audience pool. But that being said, it's been a pleasure. And once again, I've learned a lot, brother. So I appreciate your time very much. And I hope you have a great weekend. And, you know, we'll be in touch. We'll let you know when it's going to come out. We'll cut some clips for our IG channels.
Perfect.
My IG is finally off the shadow ban suspension, the 90-day that I got for fucking nothing.
Wow.
So, just, I mean, bleeding followers. But immediately, the moment it's lifted, you know, it's my posts are getting seen again finally. And
good.
Some of my friends were like, I'm not seeing any of your posts, babe. And I have like alert, notification all on. I'm like, yeah, well, I've been fucking banned. I've been.
When you talk truth, they want to shut you up. That's something I'm used to.
Find a reason. Yeah, it's sad. I mean, I know you've had your run-ins with them as well.
Good time.
Good luck to both of us.
Agreed.
Okay, brother. It's been real. We'll talk soon. Right. Thanks you again. Appreciate it. Bye, everyone.